Hello, everybody. Can people see me? I hope so. Nice to have you all here. Welcome. My name is Amy Rose Marsh, and I am the senior, well, no, I just gave myself a promotion. I'm the vice president of acquisitions and artistic development for Concord Theatricals and Samuel French. Apologies, I'm just getting my head on apparently. We are very happy to have you all here tonight to discuss one of the most important works of art in the 20th century, and arguably the most important American play ever. This is Thornton Wilder's brilliant Our Town, and we're talking about a new multilingual edition with translations by Nilo Cruz and Jeff Augustine. So thank you for being here tonight. I'll introduce our wonderful moderator and panelist in a moment, but before I do, I wanted to get into a few housekeeping things. I'm sure many people are familiar with Zoom. We've all been in Zoom rooms by now, but just a reminder. In this talk, we'll have a 30-minute discussion with our panel and then a 30-minute Q&A with our moderator and panelist, where people who are here can participate and ask questions. While this is a digital space and we can't raise our hands, we'd encourage anyone who'd like to participate in our talk to do two things. You can use Zoom's chat feature and drop a question into the chat, or you can use the questions feature and put a question in that chat box. And then once we get to the questions section of the program, we'll look in those two places and pop your questions to our panelists. So also, because this isn't live theater and we all miss the joy of being in a room together and feeling energy, feel free to use the chat feature to comment on what's being discussed. You can share observations, you can virtually clap and spread joy. We only ask that everyone remain respectful and positive. So I'll just say, yeah, it looks like people are already dropping in where they're from. If you feel so inclined, let us know where you're watching from. It's always really exciting for the panelists. Last, just letting everyone know we are recording. So cross fingers that we don't have too many technical glitches tonight. We're all knocking on wood and, saying blessing to the Zoom gods or whatnot. Now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our amazing guest. So moderating our panel tonight, we have Julie Vatain-Corfdir, who is an associate professor of English at the Sorbonne University, where she teaches theater and translation studies. Julie is co-editor of the E Theatrum Mundi series at the Sorbonne Press and the director of a bilingual theater company at Sorbonne. She has authored and edited volumes on contemporary American drama, musicals, and translating theaters, as well as its opposite, performing in the original language. So thank you, Julie, for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Amy. It's wonderful to be here.
We have our first guest. I'm very excited to introduce him, and he is personally one of my favorite people. Tappan Wilder is Thornton Wilder's nephew and has served for 25 years as his literary executor. Working with Rosie Strube, manager of Wilder's works, Tappan revisited all of Wilder's Samuel French acting editions. The resulting editions feature textual corrections, updated stage directions, and special notes. This multi-year project included the 2012 re-release of the definitive acting edition of Our Town. Tappan is also responsible for adding 4 heretofore unpublished one-act plays and 4 playlets to the public record, and opening the door for several subsidiary works based on Wilder drama and fiction, including the Our Town opera, his adaptations of George Ficar's The Beau Stratagem, sorry, I knew that was going to trip me up, and stage adaptations of the novels Theophilus North and The Bridge of Saint Louis Ray. In 2016, he arranged the first publication of Wilder's Broadway record-breaking translation of A Doll's House, published in trade edition by TCG and an acting edition by Samuel French. He's currently researching Wilder's nonfiction, his record as a lecturer and teacher, and the history of his uncle's one-act plays. So thank you, Tappan, for joining us tonight. Nice to see you.
I'm delighted to be here, of course. Thank you.
And our next panelist, Michel Hausmann, is a Venezuelan-born director, theater director, producer, and writer. He is the co-founder and artistic director of Miami New Drama, the resident company and operator of the historic Colony Theater on Miami Beach. He's also a New York Theater Workshop 2050 Fellow, a Schubert Presidential Fellow, IRNE nominee, and a Richard Rogers Award finalist, and a 2-time Knights Arts Challenge Award recipient. So welcome, Michel. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Such an honor to be here. Thank you.
Right. I'm going to let you guys take it away. I'm going to mute my mic and my video and sit back and watch you all. So thank you for being with, and I'll reappear in 30 minutes.
Thank you, Amy. Good evening, and thank you so much for inviting me to moderate this panel about one of my favorite plays, Three Simple Acts. The first one about daily life, the second one about love and marriage, the third one about death and memory. Three acts that are both timeless and timely. If this isn't the time for art that talks to us about what it means to belong to the human community, the togetherness, the value of the everyday, as well as the mortality, then I don't know what is. Now, as you know, our town takes place in the fictional New Hampshire village of Grover's Corners between 1901 and 1913, but the reach of the play, both in the author's original intentions and in the wonderful and creative life that the play has had since its premiere in 1938, far exceeds the depiction of small town life in New England, as Michel's amazing production in 3 languages has proven and explored by giving our town what I'm tempted to call the Hamilton treatment, by which I mean telling a classic story with the music of today. In this case, the polyphonous music of contemporary multilingual America. Now, I'm going to ask Tappy to tell us more about Thornton Wilder's relationship to languages in a minute, but perhaps first, to get us going, Michel, I wonder if you might say a few words about the genesis of this very original project and the big ideas behind it.
Thank you so much, Julie, for this wonderful way to start the conversation. And as always, such a pleasure to share a virtual space or a real space with my good friend, Tappan Wilder, who I love and admire so much. So, you know, I am an immigrant and I came to America in my late 20s, early 30s, or I guess late 20s. And I had never read Our Town until I was like 30 or 31. And so I did not have the experience of people encountering for the first time in high school. So I encountered it in my master's degree at Columbia, and I read it, and I could not believe what I just read. And I've been reading plays my whole life. And this was maybe my favorite play ever written. I was like, this is an American masterpiece. This is a world masterpiece. This is a work that transcends time and space and forces us, it's what great work of art are able to achieve, that you, from then on, you see a wedding in a different way. You see a funeral in a different way. You see daily conversation in a different way. It's outstanding. And then I learned more about it. Gregory Mosher was one of my professors, and he directed one of the most important productions of Our Town. And I was very much influenced by him. And I knew I wanted to do a version of Our Town. And having started our new regional theater in Miami, which is one of the most diverse, multicultural, multilingual cities in America, we are more diverse than America as a whole. However, America is slowly becoming more like Miami, more diverse, more multicultural. So we have, in a way, the vantage point of living in the America of tomorrow. So if I'm going to do a regional theater in Miami and I want to do the best American play ever written, then why am I doing it? What can I help this amazing work be reached to today's audience? So I felt that living in Miami is living in a multilingual city. I'm an immigrant family. I speak one language at home. I go to the office. There's a few other languages spoken. I order coffee in one language. So it's definitely a trilingual city. And between French, between Spanish, English, and Haitian Creole, which is sort of French. So I said, well, maybe that's a way into the story. What happens if I don't change anything other than what language people speak? And that opened up a completely new, different world, to us, and really just showed how universal the work of Thornton Wilder is. It can hold anything. You can do whatever you want with it, and it's still universal and brilliant and wraps us all.
Thank you. And I have to say, yours is one of the most moving and all-encompassing productions I've ever seen, as well as one that gave some lines an extra added layer, especially the one where, I forget if it's Mrs. Gibbs or Mrs. Webb, who says that once in your life you should see a country where they don't speak English and don't even want to. It sounds completely different in your production. Now, Tappy, I wonder if you could give us some insights into Thornton Wilder's own relationship to translation and to foreign languages in his own work, as well as in his world vision.
Well, first of all, again, I can't tell you how much fun it is to be anywhere near the two of you. And I've got to say, Michel, that there's this wonderful new publication of your production. And in the little note, I was asked and honored to contribute to it. I said, all Michel needed to do was step through the front door of his theater and observe the scene on the street. And I was lucky enough to see that and actually meet Michel Hausmann on the street and see it happen. And I think what a fantastic time I had in Miami. Well, listen, I could go on forever, but I'm only going to take a couple of minutes. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. You know, Thornton Wilder, the play, to prepare for this, I checked recently, and in the last 2 years or so, there have been 19 productions that I know of around the world of our town. And in the usual countries, if you will, you know, England and Germany and Australia, but also Sri Lanka, Korea, Tajikistan. And it's published, it's been published 35, 40 times since it was done, and those come and go. But right now in a number of countries, including, I checked, Georgia and China. So it's a world play, and it's been a world play from the beginning. Thornton Wilder wrote it that way. Within a year, it was being done in 3 or 4 countries in Europe, and then the Second World War hit, and by George, it was pirated and done illegally in a number of countries, including even Japan and Spain. It's a world play, and the man who wrote it was so worldly. I was, how do you get that across? Here's a man who spoke and worked well in 4 languages, who gave public lectures in those languages. I could never find him doing one, Michel, in Spanish. The other day, he turned up in a letter. I just got to read it to you, and then I promise no more paper. Here's a letter. He's in Lima, Peru in 1941, and he's writing to a well-known author in Colombia. And he writes, I'm going to speak on the North American tendencies in literature, Melville, Whitman, Thoreau, Poe, Emily Dickinson, quote, in Spanish, unquote. He loves Spanish, and he spent his life, and there's some hobbies we could get into, but not now. So he not only reads, but of course he's absorbing all this literature, not just reading it. In 1921, he's in Rome, and he's going to a performance of six characters in search of an author. And it's probably the world's premiere of the play. We're not quite sure, but he speaks enough Italian to know what's being said on the stage. And then a few years later, we have him crawling around the Weimar German theater after theater. He writes this up, and it's published with his sister, who's also into drama. And he's picking up all kinds of tips from the great theaters of Austria and Germany. And let me just jump ahead once more, and then I'm really going to shut up. In 1949, just to give an idea of the range of this fellow, he ends up in Aspen, Colorado to celebrate the great celebration of Goethe. And Aspen in those days was a pretty primitive place. And they had the Minneapolis Symphony Orchestra, all kinds of fancy people from all over the world, including Ortega y Gasset and Albert Schweitzer. They forgot to invite translators. So Thornton Wilder, almost without warning, does simultaneous translation of their speeches to the great conference, as well as giving his own. He called himself the burro of the conference, and he was, and he loved it. So out of this imagination comes our town, and isn't it wonderful? I've pointed this out to Michel, that he polished it off in a little town near Zurich in 1937. And then the great director who wants to do it is over there, comes over to see him. And the first reading of Our Town with Jed Harris, the director, is in Paris on October 31st, 1937. Harris goes back to the United States to produce this famous play. Wilder goes back to Spain, to Switzerland to close up shop. And what's he do just before he leaves? He gives a lecture in German at the university in Zurich. And then he comes home to the United States, to New York, to see it produced. And what's running in New York at the same time as Our Town? He's got another play going, his translation of A Doll's House, which is going to break the 60-year record. And so I'm just giving some, throw in Dante, Nietzsche, all the other heroes of his that go into this play. You've got a man who speaks it, who listens to it, who loves it, who blah, blah, blah. And here we are today with Julie Vatain, who has translated Our Town into French. She's really lived it. And Michel Hausmann, who understands language better than anybody who's seen this play, in my experience, and who's given us an extraordinary play. And I now retreat and listen to all of you. Thank you for having me, and let me make my speech. Bye.
Thank you, Tappy. So what you're saying is that both as an author and a traveler, an international spectator, and a translator, Thornton Wilder would have thoroughly approved of the multilingual version. Michel, I wonder if you could speak a little more about the detail of the different languages that were used in your version. You told us they were the languages you heard on the streets of Miami. How did you decide who spoke what language when? I noticed that there was one family that spoke more Haitian Creole and one that spoke more Spanish, but it wasn't always symmetrical. The parents might speak Spanish and the children answer in English, for instance. And there were also some very moving choices. I remember when George in the wedding says to Emily that he loves her, he says it in Spanish, which is her language and not his. So could you tell us a little more about the process of choosing the different languages?
You know, it was a very time-consuming process to choose what would be translated and what not. And in all honesty, it was a first draft, and then in the rehearsal process that also changed. But the big framework was the Webb family would be a family like my own. My wife and I are, from Venezuela. We speak Spanish at home. We are more comfortable in Spanish. Our kids, we speak to them Spanish at home. They speak mainly to us back in Spanish, but I think that they are equally comfortable between English and Spanish. The Gibbs, on the other hand, was like many families I know, where one parent is a foreigner or speaks another language and is married to an Anglo speaker. And so at home, there is this strange relation in between, both languages are spoken at the same time. Maybe when the mother speaks to the kids about don't do this, don't do that, it's in Creole or in Spanish, depending on what language that family speaks. But husband and wives, they talk to or partners, they talk amongst themselves in English, but one of them is more natural to speak English than the other. So all that, it's just layers upon layers and nuance that you can find in language. So when you decide, this line here is in one language, you are creating really tension. You're adding to tension that in a way already exists, but it forces you to see those lines from a new perspective. And that is, and that really was an experiment. When I first spoke with Tappy and with Rosie Strub, who has been, fundamental, she's a key person in the making of all this. you know, I was very honest. I said, this is an experiment. I have no idea if it'll work. I have a gut feeling that it will, but we had to see it, you know, to see if really it would work or not, and it worked. It worked so much so that a Creole, a Haitian American family approached me. They, oh, you nailed exactly the dynamics of a Haitian family. I said, no, I did nothing. Thornton Wilder nailed what it is to be alive on Earth, and it's the same experience for all of us. It just, there's different accents and language that makes us think that we are different, but it's the same. We all get nervous around somebody we like and we don't know how to speak with them, and we want to maybe ask them if they want to be with us with the rest of our life, and maybe it's an impulse. Do we really mean it? Like everything that happens in the play, we all experience that. It's none of it is particular to the Providence north of New York, and it's not in the same way that feeling completely lovesick is not particular to colonial Peru, between a set of twins, right? I mean, that's really Thornton. That's the example I always say. Bridge of San Luis Rey is not about life in colonial Peru. It's about being alive and the frailty of it. Our town is not about life in small town America. It's about being alive in the frailty of it.
Julie, can I say something? Because,
Sure.
Michel is suggesting that he was worried. He didn't use this word. He was worried that maybe what he was doing was a gimmick. I never felt that way. None of us ever felt that.
Not a gimmick.
Because these guys are such extraordinary artists. And they came to New York and we met there. I mean, we just knew this was the real thing. I never for a moment thought this would. And of course, I saw the production fell apart. I mean, it was extraordinary. And somebody once said, it's just a gimmick. No, it's not. It wasn't a gimmick. As you say, this was opened a door to the universality of this play in an extraordinary way for our century. And it's a golden age for our town, thanks to in part what you did. That's it. I just want to make that point.
Thanks, and I quite agree, and it actually leads me to my next question. Just commenting first on what Michel was saying. As a French person who speaks English half the time at home, I felt that it was extremely natural and very delicately done. The way that they switched from one language to the next, it felt very sort of intuitive and very true to life as well. So I really quite agree with what Tappy was saying. Now, Tappy, the contemporary choice of the trilingual production explores and reveals, as we were saying, a universal dynamic of the play that was part of Wilder's project from the beginning. Thornton Wilder speaks of dealing with the life of a village against the life of the stars. So the universality is there. Now, taking the spirit of the work in new directions is something that, as literary executor, you have encouraged, opening up this and other plays to the 21st century, authorizing translations, adaptations, musical adaptations. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about this dynamic.
Well, I think one of the great, an artist's great gift during his life are his works. And one of the great gifts that he offers after his death is, if his records continues to speak, is to inspire the works of others who are drawn on what he's done. It seems to me that's a sign of the insight, health, and the dead aim that they took in their art, that it still works, that it not just works, but celebrates and lives. So I am, you're right, I'm very open to people coming with ideas inspired by my uncle, who have perhaps a different take on things. Now, I want to be careful, because I do like to echo a great phrase of the civil rights preacher who had a great influence on my life, William Sloane Coffin, who was fond of saying, if you stand for nothing, you fall for anything, right? And I think I stand for a lot, but I've learned to listen. I've learned to listen, and to listen to people's ideas. The artists of today and how they fit in with Thornton Wilder of yesterday, as well as Thornton Wilder tomorrow.
Wonderful. Thank you. Now, from a European point of view, and maybe this is me being naively European, but sort of multilingualism in the theater is something that we're, I'd say, used to having. It brings me back to actors, the Italian actors traveling with their commedia dell'arte practices through the course of Europe. Or I mean, even today, in current practices, if you want to see Molière in German in Paris, it's not that surprising at all. I don't have much experience of that going on in America. So I was wondering, and this is a question for you both, about the relationship of American audiences to multilingual theater. How does an American audience react to hearing its own classic through the defamiliarizing of another language? How did that work with audiences?
Well, I mean, it's a really good question. We have become bilingual theater in general. We have a Spanish language season, and we have an English season, which is our main season. And every now and then we have shows that are purely bilingual or that are all in Spanish but part of the English language season. It's translated. So, but something really interesting happened in this case, which is that in Miami, theater is very segregated in terms of language. There is a whole world of English theater with its own stars, and there's a whole world of Spanish language theater with its own stars. Those worlds are not aware of each other. They have no idea that the other exists. They never share any space together. So, what I was excited about this production is to, first bring those group of artists together who did not know each other existed, had no, and they also work in completely different ways. The Spanish language actors are not used to, the equity rules. And, because of equity, and you need to, you do 8 hours a day for, 3, 4 or 5 weeks. The Spanish language actors are used to very longer, rehearsal process, etc. So even bringing those two groups of artists together was a culture shock. You could see them at the first rehearsal. Then we would lunch for you break for lunch, and then it's like a high school cafeteria. The English language, go one way, and then as we progressed, we really all became one community. But in the same way, the audience also, came together for the first time. Those two, we did an effort of promoting the show both in the Spanish language market and in the English language market. What was most moving to me were people who liked our town and came to see our town and left even more excited about our town. The people that moved, that I had the nicest conversation were people who were already true believers of the power of our town. And in a way, seeing this production made them, made them even more aware and excited about their, profound love for our town since they played it in high school or something. So that, and, we really introduced, Thornton Wilder to, he was produced in Venezuela before my time, but of course people are not aware of our town in the Spanish language in Latin America in the way that they are, aware of it in the English market. So this was a wonderful introduction.
I think echoing what Michel, extraordinary thing that he did in Miami, as we see other people mount this play, we will see that great lesson, Julie, that great art unites, and especially with young people. It'll be very exciting to see how young people today in increasingly parts of our country who can deal with both languages, and it's going to bring them together. It's going to be a wonderful unifying experience. Don't you think, Michel, that's what's beautiful about great art? And that's one reason this is such a very great play and so timely, as you said, Julie, in the beginning. Timely. And if we can do it through, what better way than through very brave efforts through the language of the play. in different languages. I think it's very, very exciting.
I agree, extremely exciting. And thank you, Michel. I was already aware of the play being a bridge between past and present and across an ocean with my own work on translating it, but I wasn't aware of it being a bridge between different artistic communities that were brought together around this work. It's really wonderful to hear. Perhaps one last question before we, go ahead, Amy, you're back.
Well, we could start with that question. I'm sorry, I feel like
it's fine, go on.
The bad guy. Yeah, thank you guys. This has been a wonderful chat, but I want to make sure, because I'm sure our attendees, have some questions are burning to get out too. So let's ask your last question, Julie, but I'm just coming on here to alert everyone we're transitioning. So if you want to start dropping questions into the Q&A and the chat box, after this question, we'll move into our Q&A, and then I'll disappear again and come back in a second.
Thanks. This last question of mine was about time, since I was talking about the play being a bridge between time and present, past and present, sorry. I was wondering about the role of translation and the choice of words, of the sort of time of the language that was made in the Spanish and Creole translations. Did the translators choose some old-fashioned phrases or something more contemporary to sort of bring the play to us?
Right. I mean, it's a very good question. It's a very good question. The aesthetic of the play was, turn of the century. You looked at, it wasn't naturalistic because that's never the intention of Thornton Wilder, but we were not trying to make it happen in Miami today, right? No, the play takes place in Grover's Corners, at the turn of the century. And so, the language, it's a simple language, right? But you could tell that it's also, I would say dated, but it's maybe not how we speak today, but it also doesn't feel from a completely different era, maybe because of the simplicity of the language itself. So when I spoke with the brilliant minds of Nilo Cruz and of Jeff Augustine, we spoke about that necessity of keeping it, it needed to feel, it should not, there shouldn't be any sentences that would be so anachronistic that you feel like it's been said today. Maybe the language is not exactly how we spoke Spanish 100 years ago, because I do think that Spanish has gotten a larger transformation in the colloquial than English, but definitely it felt timeless but not contemporary. That's kind of what we were aiming for. And I mean, thank you for pointing that out, because that was a really hard thing for us to try to get it right.
Thank you. That was my feeling as well when I was translating, looking for some sort of timeless access to language rather than making it too contemporary or making it sound too old-fashioned. Thank you. I think Amy will come back now.
I'm back. Yes, thank you, Julie. So I'm excited to open this up, and I think, Julie, feel free to take off your moderator crown and put on your translator panelist crown, and you can probably join us as someone who's also translated our town. I'm sure you have some perspective on the questions that are coming forward. But I wanted to start with a question because it was our first one right away from Paul Smith, it's a two-parter. So do you feel that there is a conflict in this play in our town? So I guess what is the central conflict, which is interesting. And then number two, how do you think the role of the stage manager opening the play adds to the dramatic irony for the audience? Those are big questions.
Mr. Wilder, do you want to take a stab at it, or?
I think you could interpret I think if I were a student having to write a term paper about that question, right? As the historian I am, I would say in different periods, the stage manager has been interpreted in different ways. And in different productions. It's fascinating. So now it's a wonderful question. It's a fascinating question. The role of the stage manager is an absolutely fascinating. What kind of figure is it? And I know my uncle saw the stage manager as changing from the first act all the way through. The question was focusing on the beginning. What's the stage manager like in that first moment in Act 1? And what is the stage manager like at the end of Act 3? He saw just his view only. He saw a change going from a sort of folksy fellow. Hey, here's our town, blah, blah, blah. Here's the drugstore, blah, blah. Everybody stops in. By the end, he's a very distant figure, a very distant, austere figure. But that's one way to do it. So that's the way you could see it in the beginning.
Right.
I don't know. I'm glad I'm not a student and have to write that term paper. It's a good question. Throw it to you, sir.
Well, I'll add to
And Julie. And Julie's translated the play, so we can get her on this one too.
Yes.
She's very bright, very bright. She's a bright girl. She's Emily.
Thank you, but I think Michel wanted to say something.
Well, let me just talk about. I think that the play is filled with conflict. It's in the same exact conflict as one long conflict of arc. Well, you can say that it's about being, it's about the arc of being alive. But in all honesty, every single scene has a conflict. A husband doesn't know exactly how to communicate with a wife. We all know what that is. A young person who's in love with someone else and feels like wants to commit, but it's unsure. So what the heck? Let me go for it. A daughter and a mother trying to communicate, but not getting it right. I mean, that's conflict. Every single thing. It's about conflict of small things, but that's what life is. Like, rarely do we have to revenge the death of our father because our uncle killed him and he's sleeping with our mother, right? Like, that doesn't happen. But the conflict of being alive, it's exactly that. It's exactly those small conflicts which are huge. They're for us living and for us trying to communicate with a loved one and not finding that bridge. They're huge.
Yes, and I would say that to come back to the question of dramatic irony, the stage manager is a figure of dramatic irony. From the very beginning, he tells you that everybody's going to die. Look at that boy, Joe Crowell, all that education for nothing. The war broke out and he died in France. Or there's another act after this, you know what it's about. And then you're like, oh, it's going to be about death. Okay. But at the same time, he deconstructs that dramatic irony by just breaking the fourth wall and talking to the audience so very directly and making you question what theater is about and what the reality you're watching is. And I think that perhaps adds another layer of conflict to the play, which is the conflict from the spectator between the conflict of accepting the realities that the play is giving you, is showing you. And I think the play is very much also about accepting the hardship of life and about mourning, especially the third act in the graveyard. Yeah. It's a way to teach you how to mourn.
I think the loneliness of all the characters is absolutely striking to me. Well, that's just an aside. I don't know.
Yeah, that's always been a big thing for me too, Tappan, though. It stays with you. Not that I want to, I will go on to the next question. So we have lots. So there is a note, this is from Christopher Eklund. Thank you, Christopher. There is a note in the published version that if you were to mount this production again, you would remove the language barrier entirely. Does that mean you'd like to try a version with no English whatsoever?
No, well, no, what I meant in that note was that, what we did is we translated everything into English, right? So when somebody spoke Spanish, there would be an English translation. When somebody spoke Creole, there was an English translation. We also did the translation just above the head of the actor. So everything would be in the same plane. But I went on to regret later on that there really should always have been two translations at the same time. Whatever language wasn't spoken, it should have been, if somebody's speaking Spanish, then Creole and English. Somebody was speaking English, Creole and Spanish. And, it was a decision that I got like halfway through it, through the run, I realized that I had, not open enough doors. That so well, at least that's something for the next time we get to do it. I'll get that part right.
Can I ask you to, because this came up in a conversation I was having, I'm going rogue here, but when you guys in your presentation, did you use super titles, subtitles, or it was just the language, or did people have a way to know what the actors were saying as they were speaking it?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Yeah, Michelle, when people weren't speaking in English, was it translated for the audience, or was it, because I didn't see the Miami?
Right. It was always translated into English. Whatever, if it was Spanish, then English would be on top. If it was Creole, it was English. So the English language audience always understood what was going on.
Got it.
But
okay.
Not so much. I assume that the Spanish language speakers or the Creole speaker, us by nature, we are bilingual, right? But that really is not the case for everyone. A percentage of our communities don't speak English, and I think looking back at, I would have liked to have added that extra layer.
And did you consider removing the layer and not having the English audience understand everything? Just not having a translation, having them guess from the gestures. And
I did that. I did that for another. I did. I worked on a production of Miss Julie. I did a new version of Miss Julie, not Vatain, another Julie, and it was a bilingual. Christine and Jean, or Cristina y Juan, spoke Spanish among each other, and then they would speak English, to Miss Julie. But so yes, I didn't for that. My idea was, well, if you speak English, you would understand the entire play. If you spoke English and Spanish, then you would also understand the deleted scenes, right? You wouldn't lose anything, but you would get more. You would get more out of the story. So it felt very mischievous doing that, and I enjoyed it very much. But for Our Town, I did not think it was a problem. I think Our Town, the more barriers we remove, that's really what the play is asking, I feel.
I love it for the Strindberg, though. Thanks.
Here's a question. This is interesting. This new version came out of Miami. The play is for everywhere, so we've established that. But if staging this version outside of Miami, does the production need to conjure Miami or basically any multilingual community? I can imagine, sorry, I'm reading from the chat, so my scrolling just got off. I can imagine other languages of immigrant families in this country being represented based on one. Is it possible to use this model and adapt for additional languages as you've done here? Thanks, sorry.
Mr. Wilder, listen, I think it'll be great, but that's for the estate to say, maybe if you change the Creole to Arabic or Hebrew or Portuguese, I think, the concept proved to hold water, right? So I think that if they work with a correct translator, and I would personally be extremely excited about that, that next life of it. But Mr. Wilder, it's your property, so.
Yes, I would be excited too, and I can be found. And Rosie and I are ready. Rosie and I are ready for anything. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, that's great. This is a personal question, so it's from me. So I feel like two people that we've talked a lot about and that aren't with us tonight, because one is writing for a television show. I think another one has a reading going up soon, but are Nilo and Jeff, the translators. So I'm very curious about how they became involved with the project. Michelle, did you have a relationship with them in their work, or how that kind of all played together?
I directed a work of Nilo in New York. We worked together on the premiere of I forgot the name briefly. The Color of Desire, El Color del Deseo. And we did the world premiere in the Spanish language version, and in New York at the Repertorio Español. And we became, good friends, and I admire Nilo very much. I enjoyed a lot working on his text. And Jeff, I knew because we were together as fellows in New York Theater Workshop. and he's from Miami, and he spoke Creole growing up, and so he was just so logical. He was a friend. I sent him an email, and immediately he was excited to be a part of it. And that's a problem when you work with really successful people, is that they sometimes are not available. Sometimes they have to wait months and months for a translation to come in. But when it comes in, you're happy you waited that time for, because I think that they did a spectacular job, both of them.
They also they send their regards too, I'll say that. So we did invite them. I think both of them were very sad that they couldn't be here, but TV is a very tempting, yeah, when you're in a writer's room.
Amy, it's just like to just throw in that the whole question of translation here opens up a wonderful door, and I think it's worth. My uncle was really nuts about translators and felt they didn't get their due, and I'm family's thrilled that we have a major prize given in his name. He'd be so pleased about it. A prize for translation by the American Academy of Arts and Letters in our country every 2 years, and it's been given now for some years. And Gregory Rabassa was the first one who got it. The great translator of Marquez. And it's a marvelous prize, and we're very, very proud of it, and as he was of all translators. So hats off to that wonderful task and wonderful skill.
Michel, I have a question that's come in about production too. So I really want to see this Miami New Drama production now, because I understand that the wedding was done on stage with the audience invited to participate. And that's such a unique, cool directorial choice. Can you talk about that a bit, about how that was made and what that was like for the audience?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's actually one of my favorite moments in a play ever. That I've worked on. So obviously how the play began in our version, the actors were kind of getting ready, and there was somebody at the piano playing piano, and then actors would come one by one, and they were singing the song. Sometimes it was the Beatles, sometimes it's popular Latin American song, and that was as the audience were coming in. We weren't paying much attention to it. It was happening in the back, but it kind of get this sense of community and people singing together. And then boom, the stage manager enters, everybody sits on, the actors were all seated on their seats, which was on stage all the time. And he just starts this place called Our Town, and blah, blah. And then when we were doing the wedding ceremony, the wedding ceremony is kind of the happiest we get on the play. We actually have a wedding. People who are in love are together. That's wonderful. And then the immediate next page, we are after a intermission, we are in a cemetery, right? So that always gets your stomach. So I said, well, how can I help make that punch even stronger? So we eliminated the idea of the second intermission, and what we said, after the wedding, we go back to the piano and everybody started to sing a song, everybody started to dance, and it became a party, and that it was an anachronistic. That definitely were modern songs, etc. And we actively invited the audience to come in. The actors went, back in the day where you can touch the actors and breathe in this in their space. We brought them in, on stage. Our stage is really big, and every night a bunch of maybe 70 people from the audience would come up, and for 5 to 10 minutes we were all dancing and having a good time. And then immediately the actors kind of like dragged everybody away, and in a matter of like 15 seconds the stage was completely empty except the actors sitting on the chairs. And then immediately the third act would start, and the audience, I mean, imagine how happy they are. They were dancing on the stage and jumping around and giving shots of vodka with our people. Like, we were just a party. It was a great party. And then we were at the cemetery, and they still have the red faces of dancing, and then the shock of where they are. Like that moment of really pulling the rug away from the audience was massive, massive, and it hit me like every time. You know, I would get teary up every time because it was so abrupt, so abrupt.
I think we have a few more questions and then we'll end our evening. And, you know, thank you guys. I mean, I'll thank you about 50 more times before in the next 5 minutes, but I can already feel myself being like, oh, this is so great. Tappan, I think this is one for you and it's quite heady. This is from Stephen. I can't see your last name, Stephen, but thank you. The script for Skin of Our Teeth has Moses speaking Hebrew and Homer speaking archaic Greek. These passages are not translated into English. Not all productions have these Hebrew and Greek passages, but Wilder indicated that not everyone will get it, but for those who do, it will be a great experience. Uh-oh, hold on 1 second. I gotta finish the question. Is Wilder telling us to do more productions with untranslated foreign language passages? Do you think he would have been pro this or?
I know this, Stephen. He's a wonderful, thank you, Stephen, for asking a really good question. And he's not, he didn't know, I didn't know he was going to ask a question, and this is not a plug, but this is a very distinguished classicist who had a long and successful career as a psychiatrist. And in retirement, he's gone back to doing what he always wanted to do, was study the classics. He got a PhD, and his book on Wilder and the classics is going to be published next year. And he's absolutely wonderful. And he keeps asking these marvelous questions. I don't know the answer to that, Stephen. I'm going to leave it up to you to decide. But I do know that Rosie and I, in some of the plays, we have put in translations. And I'm trying to remember how we dealt with that one in The Skin. I wish I could remember. Rosie is my memory on this. I don't know whether we added the translation to the new edition or not. And so we leave the question hanging is quite wonderful. And I'll let him decide how to answer it. How's that for ducking it?
I feel like we could probably take another 4 hours on Skin of Our Teeth if we were going to. That play has so much to unpack. I have one more question before we close out the night, and I want to, it's very specific, but I'm going to make it a little broader. So are we still hoping? There were some murmurs about our town potentially going back to Broadway prior to our COVID. I don't know what you can say or if you can wink, but are there still Broadway plans in the works? And then I guess I would kind of broaden that out. Are there just future plans from the estate, or what should we be aware of concerning Wilder going forward into the future?
Well, we have a 125th birthday celebration. My uncle's birthday was 124th, was just a couple of days ago, and we released the logo, and we're going to be celebrating 125 years starting soon next year. And it's going to be a celebration of the range of his work. And also, I think we're terribly interested, and this has come up today, you know, in his influence on young people and young artists in our time. I mean, nothing would give us more pleasure than to celebrate that as part of it. I'm not in a position to talk on or off the record about our town on Broadway. I've seen it's widely known that the rights are there, but I can't speak to when or whether. I hope very much it'll be back on Broadway before too long. It belongs there. And I think it's always exciting to have a Broadway production. And therefore, I look forward to it. But I really am not ducking it. I can't say more than that, except I hope it'll happen. And I believe it'll be a glorious and important production.
Hear, hear. And I think, you know, everyone would join me in saying you have a number of people in this room that would be there to attend. So we will, you know, sing praises to the theater powers that be, and hopefully this can come back to Broadway. So I want to, if everyone will join me in Zoom clapping in the chat box. Thank you so much, Julie and Tappan and Michelle. On behalf of Concord and Samuel French, it means so much that you would choose to spend your evening and join us to share in this very special play and this very special project. I mean, we've, as a publisher, not to get super sappy, but our town has a very special place in the Samuel French catalog. And I think it is so moving just to see how it's been brought into the 21st century and it continues to live and be celebrated. So I really appreciate you joining us all. One couple housekeeping things for our Read More Play Club fans. So I want to take this opportunity to announce our next very exciting selection for next month. We are going to be meeting on May 26th at 6 p.m. to read and discuss Ken Ludwig's wonderful play, Dear Jack, Dear Louise, which is a letters play, a play in letters, and it explores his parents' courtship during World War II. It's an enchanting, heartwarming love story. Ken's story is very touching. And we'll also be talking with Arena Stage, who produced the live stage production, the world premiere, but then they also did, I don't want to spoil the surprise, but they did a very unique special production designed for social distancing. It's one of the most creative things we've seen coming out of the pandemic, so it'll be a fun discussion. But for information on that May 26th club, which will be coming up very soon, it'll be posted on the Read More Plays webpage, and I think we'll drop information into the chat. But please continue to follow us, circle back. We'll be making some announcements when the discount code for the book comes out and when the registration is available, which should be shortly. But one more time, I just want to turn it back to our guests. You guys are amazing. Thank you everyone for joining us. Hopefully this recording will be online soon, and I wish you all the best evening. Thank you so much.
So much. I enjoyed this very much. A pleasure being with such amazing people together. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you so much. I love this play and I'm still learning new things about it. Thanks to you all, but thank you.
Me too, and thank you so much. It's been great.
Thanks. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.